I want to talk to you about an idea called on-ramping. And I want to talk to you about the idea of player engagement surfaces. I also want to talk to you about something called mastery depth. And I'm going to do that by talking to you about a perfectly good little indie game called Cobalt. Now, there is a lot of reason to imagine you might not know anything about Cobalt. Like, it is a indie game about big-headed, small, naive, and childlike things engaging with a big and dangerous world. So there's a lot of cracks for this one to fall down. What makes it a little surprising, as far as its reputation and its cultural presence goes, is that Cobalt's distributed by Mojang. Like, yeah, that Mojang, the Minecraft people. Now, there's a reason for this. There was a period after Hatsune Miku made Minecraft that there were a lot of other projects sort of like, hey, let's try this other stuff, and let's try a whole bunch of different ideas that definitely aren't Minecraft, that, you know, worked to a varying degree, and, you know, some got a lot of work, some got a little work. There was a whole bunch of legal furore around the game name Scrolls, for example. There was a lot of, for lack of a better word, stuff. In this period, one game that was not being developed by, you know, the Minecraft people was Cobalt. And from what I can tell, Cobalt very much feels like a game made by people whose most recent experience making games is loving working on Cobalt. If you're wondering about the kind of game it is, it's very much a frantic, runny, jumpy, shooty, gunny kind of game with a lot of information flying at you very fast, both in your own visual experience and in terms of the interface. There is a lot going on with this game, and with only a little bit of playing, and trust me, the video you're watching here is almost all of my playing of Cobalt. With a little bit of playing, I got to see, as it were, the edges of the skill cliff for this game. Cobalt is a game that very clearly can reward you for being very good at it. It's got social elements, it's got a kind of deathmatch and cooperative play forms, and it is big. There is a lot of Cobalt to get into. Cobalt has a wide variety of weapons, which all have lots of different ways that they interact with the world. It has an economy for upgrades. It has a lot of just stuff. And I think that if you like Cobalt, if you spend the time to become really, really good at Cobalt, Cobalt is probably incredibly rewarding. I did not, and I am not going to. This is not a mark against Cobalt. This is a simple deference to the scope of Cobalt. I teach making games as a project, and one thing that almost never comes up when I'm teaching is the idea of marketing your game. How you sell it, how you're going to get people to buy it and play it. Because I think that that's kind of unnecessary for the lesson that I'm teaching. I think that when you approach games as commercial objects, there's a very different relationship to yourself and the thing you're crafting, and it teaches you the wrong skills, because the skills to sell games are the same as the skills to sell lawnmowers and the skills to sell cans of beans, and that's why almost all these big CEO companies have got someone in charge whose prior experience was pizza or beans or something like that. And they're all really good at making a company that makes games, but also they tend to have shocking, horrible cultures and often produce games that are a little bad because the actual experience of making games is difficult and it involves a relationship to the game that's very different to the relationship to a commercial object. I'm a firm believer that you make the best games you can when you are supported, and when you are comfortable, and when you can play. One thing I do talk about, though, not getting people to buy your game, but getting people to play your game a second time. What's the hook? What's the idea? What's the fantasy? What is, as I say, the player engagement surface? A game that has 7 players required minimum is going to have a much harder time getting those players together than a game that works with 1 or 2. If your game can scale from 2 players to 6 players, it's going to have different opportunities for play than if it's just a game for 2. Similarly, a game for only 1 player can often have the most effective engagement surface, but then you've got to compete with everything else that a person could do on their own, including going and finding a friend. These challenges present in how you get someone to engage with your thing, how you hook them in, how you maintain their attention, and how you can make it so that the play experience the first time convinces them that, hey, I want to get involved and play it again the second time. I want the second time to be different. I think I've learned something. I think I've improved what I can do. This creates a secondary allure of the game, something that I sometimes refer to as mastery. Mastery is when you understand more of how the game works, more of the elements that go into the game, and what is and is not under your control. What you can or can't be reasonably expected to work with when you are playing the game. I've talked about the idea of mastery depth when talking about a game called Century Golem. Now, I am not going to go off on a tangent about Century Golem here, even though I love it to bits, and it is also a game about adorable, humanized, aesthetically robotic things. The thing with Century Golem is I know more about Century Golem than anyone I play Century Golem with. But that doesn't mean I win all the time at Century Golem. Century Golem has a variety of cards that make up its play experience, and a whole bunch of different ways that those cards can interact. And all that information is public. So any given player who sits down to play Century Golem, they may not have all the cards memorized, but they don't need to, because the only information that's going to wind up being relevant to the game are the cards that actually show up. On the other hand, in a game like Magic the Gathering, being able to control in your head for every possible meaningfully available card that your opponents may or may not have in this particular situation is going to be meaningful for your play experience. This is how you can tell really good players of some formats apart, where they're able to anticipate what their opponent has, not just by what they did, but by what they don't do. That's a kind of mastery, and the depth of mastery required. Lots and lots of video games do not require much depth of mastery. I think Cobalt is a game designed for people who want mastery of Cobalt. I think that this game is a wonderful example of a kind of mechanical abyss that you can fall into, and you can become really excellent at Cobalt. But that doesn't happen unless you have some other reason to engage, unless you have something that pulls you in, something about this game that you deeply love, that excites you, that makes you interested and eager and engaged to play with it. Which is okay. You might just look at this game and go, this looks pretty sweet, I want a shot. You might find the idea of a $15 game that has hours upon hours of engagement in it really exciting. That's great, you should definitely check it out. And I don't want to sound like I'm saying there's anything wrong with this game. I just want to think about the ways that this game could turn me from someone who played it once into someone who played it twice. The interface for Cobalt has all these little ways that you could just subtly improve the experience. Just a little bit, and they're things that you wouldn't necessarily think of or notice if you weren't already very entrenched in the game. There's a sequence when you run through a room and you might run past something that's got a hint on it. But your natural running speed is so fast, and the pop-up speed is so slow, and the text appearance speed is so slow, you might zip past it before the clue has intelligibly appeared in your eyes and made you go, oh, that's text, I want to read that. Which means the things this game is presenting to try and assist you in playing it are working at odds with the very mechanisms of the way the game works. This game looks really charming. This game looks like it has a lot of love put into it. And if you go looking for wikis on these things, you'll find this game has lore. I definitely enjoyed the time I played with Cobalt, but I want everyone who designs games to remember, not everyone is as invested in your game as you, and lots of people are going to play it once and put it down if you don't find a way to make them into repeat players.